Matthew chapter 2. Let me just read that to you. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it is written by the prophet, 'And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, 'Go and search diligently for the child, and when you found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him.' After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them, until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way." In life, major events demand a response. When something, just think about that for a second. When something major happens in your life, it demands some kind of response from you. When the towers fell on 9/11, a whole nation had to respond. When you get that phone call that someone that you love has passed away, you have to respond. When you're in a relationship and one person gets down on one knee and makes a proposal, you kind of have to respond, right? Major events don't let us just sit on the sidelines. They demand something from us. And there was an event, there's never been, really, when you think about an event bigger in human history than what we just read about in Matthew chapter 2. The incarnation of God into flesh. The eternal God, the one who spoke the universe into existence, compressed himself into a baby's body and entered into our world. And that demands a response. One commentator put it this way: Matthew confronts his audience in this passage with a summons to personal decision by contrasting the responses of the major characters. You see, sometimes, again, I think, like I talked about last week, familiarity with a story can make us just kind of speed read through it and not really slow down and think about what it is that we're reading. You see, Matthew isn't just telling us a Christmas story. He's forcing us to look in a mirror and ask ourselves, which of the four responses is mine? Which of the ways in which the characters in this chapter respond mirrors the way I respond to the most incredible event that has ever happened in human history, God becoming flesh? And what's interesting is when we see these responses in Matthew chapter 2, they're really the same, like nothing has changed in 2,000 years. We're still responding in one of these four ways. So this morning I want to walk you through this text and help you to identify how they responded. But my goal in getting you to see how they responded is that we can ask ourselves, how are we responding to the king? What does our response look like this morning to the king? So let's start in verse 1. Matthew tells us that after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. Now, before we get to the wise men, I need you to understand who this Herod guy is. He's Herod the Great. And his response kind of sets up the whole drama of the story. And he was called the Great because he was great at a lot of things. There were a lot of things that he was really good at. He was a brilliant politician, number one. He was an incredible builder, number two. The temple in Jerusalem that the Jews were so proud of, Herod built that. He kept the peace in a very volatile region. You've got to be a pretty savvy politician to handle the Middle East and to keep all of those people from fighting, right? I mean, even to this day, we see how complicated that is. But he somehow managed it. But here's the thing. He was also paranoid, violent, and ruthless. You see, Herod he was more interested in saving his throne than saving his soul. And that's the key to understanding his response. When the wise men show up asking, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? Herod hears one thing. Threat. Right? Look at verse 3. It says, when Herod heard this, he was troubled. Now that word troubled in the Greek is the word tarasso, and it means to be deeply agitated. To be stirred up, to be thrown into confusion would be another way to put it. And this isn't like mild concern, like, oh, somebody's here, oh, whoa. No, this was something that this was full-blown panic, right? He was just spinning out of control. One commentator noted that the word is too weak in English. He says terrified or in turmoil would be a better interpretation in the English for us to understand just the effect, the impact that it had on him. And then look at what Herod does. He calls the wise men secretly in verse 7, and he asks them exactly when the star appeared. Why? Because he's already planning murder. If I know when the star appeared, and that means the baby was born at that point, as we're going to see, he's going to do everything in his power to take this king out. Verse 8 says this is pure deception. It says, go and search diligently for this young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me that I too may go and worship him. Right? With a sword, not with gold and frankincense and myrrh. I want to take out this threat. I'm responding with hostility to Jesus. Herod had no intention of worshiping anyone but himself. And here's what I want you to see. Herod represents those who see Christ as a threat to their autonomy and their power. He had a kingdom. He had a throne. He had control. A new king threatened all of that. And the same is true for us. See, when you walked into this door this morning, you have a plan for your life. You have a little kingdom you have built. You have an illusion of control. And when confronted with Jesus and submitting to him and letting him be the Lord of your life, we often feel threatened. Just like Herod. I remember being a young person, and when presented with the gospel, one of the things that it's foolish now to think about it, but like one of the things that really prevented me from accepting Christ was I just had this fear he was going to send me to Africa. It's like if I submit, then he's just going to ship me out, and I'm going to be a missionary, and I'm going to be in the bush, and I can't do that. I'll pass. I got a plan, and that's not part of it. It's ironic how God works. Years later, I got to go and preach in Africa, and some of the sweetest people, some of the best time I ever had, but I didn't know that as a 16-year-old. And let me tell you, rebellion against God is ultimately irrational. It always is. You think about it. If the prophecy about Jesus is true, if he really is the promised Messiah, the King of Kings, then resistance is futile. Right? You can't defeat God. You can't outmaneuver the Almighty. Yet Herod tries anyway. Right? Just like a lot of us do. Now, Herod's violent response makes sense kind of in one way, but not in another. If the Magi are wrong about the prophecy, why even bother with this child? If they are right about it, why attempt to resist it? Does he think that he can somehow mess up God's plan and God's purposes? Herod's actions reminds us that rebellion against God is always irrational. It's foolish to fight God. But sin makes people foolish. Right? Some of you this morning, you're living in hostility toward Jesus. Maybe not openly, maybe not violently like Herod, but in your heart you see Jesus as a threat. A threat to your lifestyle, a threat to your decisions, a threat to your control, a threat to everything that you have built, and you this morning are fighting him. Can I just be honest with you this morning? That is a fight that you will lose every time. I say that because I love you. Herod died a paranoid, miserable man. His kingdom crumbled, but Jesus, he's still on the throne. Now let's look at the next response. Look at the second half of verse 3. It says that when Herod was troubled, all Jerusalem was troubled with him. Now, that's an interesting phrase. All Jerusalem. The whole city shook when Herod shook. Why would the people of Jerusalem, be troubled by the news of the Messiah's birth? Right? Shouldn't they have been excited? Shouldn't they have been like throwing a parade? Like, he's finally here. This is what we've been waiting on. We've been going and listening to rabbis talk for years, and this is the culmination of everything they've talked about. They've been waiting for centuries. And every time they read Isaiah 9, Psalm 89, they're longing for this moment. So why are they troubled? Because they weren't asking what is true. They were asking, could this somehow lead to my harm? That's a question of fear. It implies that their main concern was not Herod's downfall, but rather the harsh retaliation that such a danger could provoke in their lives. An angry, threatened Herod was a danger to everyone around them, or around him. In other words, the people of Jerusalem calculated the costs. Right? They said, if this baby really is the Messiah and Herod finds out, there's going to be bloodshed. And they weren't wrong on that point. There's going to be violence. We might get caught in the crossfire of said violence. And so fear paralyzed them from the proper action. And guys, fear is a powerful thing. I see it all the time in counseling. People know what's right. They know what God is calling them to do, but they are afraid of what might happen if they actually do it. I can't say that to my spouse and deal with this issue because they might leave me. What if I lose my job because I stand up for my Christian faith and ask for Sunday off? What if my friends reject me when I start talking about Jesus? I'll just be quiet. In his book, The Dynamic Heart in Daily Life, Jeremy Pierre says that the heart was custom made for worshiping God. And the closer it comes to that design, the better it works. In fact, when the heart responds rightly to God, it will respond rightly to everything else. You see, when fear governs our hearts instead of faith, everything gets twisted. The people of Jerusalem should have been worshiping. That should have been their response. Instead, they're trembling. They're in fear. They were so focused on self-preservation that they missed the arrival of the Savior. Peter writes in 1 Peter 3:14, do not fear what they fear. Do not be frightened. Fear must not govern our decisions. He has not given us a spirit of fear. Right? We must let truth guide us. And the people of Jerusalem, they just completely missed this. They asked, what can go wrong? If this is the Messiah, how is this going to impact us? And they failed to ask the most important question, what is right? What is the right response to the Messiah? And this next response is one of the saddest. And we see it in verses 4 through 6. And this is the response of apathy. Herod gathers all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, and he asks them where Christ was to be born. And without hesitation, they answer, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written through the prophet. Guys, I want you to see, they nail it, right? This is Bible trivia, high level, high stakes. You got to give the right answer. Boom. They know the right answer. They quote Micah 5:2 perfectly. They knew exactly where the Messiah was supposed to be born. And here's what gets me. They don't just know the verse. They understood it. They understood that particular verse was pointing to the Messiah. Not just some ruler, not just some king, but the King of Kings, the Messiah. They connect it to the promise of a shepherd king who will rule over Israel. Theologically, they are on point. But then what do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They answer the king's question, and they go home. They don't join the wise men. They could have. They don't rush to Bethlehem to see if it's true. They have perfect knowledge, and they do nothing with it. One commentator notes the scribes and priests function as composite characters like a chorus in a Greek drama. And here's his point. that while these authorities knew where the Messiah would be born, they do not join the wise men in their quest. These were the religious leaders, guys. And they failed to act on the most critical biblical knowledge. This is the danger of head knowledge without a heart response. It's the danger of head knowledge without a heart response. And guys, this is a real danger for religious people. We can know all the right answers. We can quote all the right verses. We can win every Bible trivia contest. But if our knowledge doesn't move us to action, it is worthless. We must be careful that we're not educated beyond our obedience. This is a danger sometimes in picking leaders in a church. Is it's really easy to look and go, oh, well, they know all this stuff. But you need to ask the second, more important question, in my opinion. They know the stuff. Yes, good prerequisite. But are they doing the stuff? Are they living a life that honors Jesus? Or do they come on Sunday, quote all the right answers, and then go home and worship themselves all week long? Worship their vices all week long. And then come back on Sunday and quote all the right verses. James says it the best. Be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. The scribes heard the word. They knew the word. They taught the word. But they didn't do the word. Again, Pierre writes about the difference between theoretical belief and functional belief. He says, you can claim to believe something, but your life demonstrates what you truly believe. Let me say that again. He says, you can claim to believe something, but your life demonstrates what you truly believe. The scribes theoretically believed in the Messiah. But functionally, they couldn't be bothered to walk 5 miles to Bethlehem to even check it out. One commentator puts it perfectly. He says, the priests and scribes should have joined the wise men and ran to Bethlehem. But they were satisfied to quote Scripture and to go home. They should have joined the wise men. So let me ask you something this morning. Is your knowledge of Jesus moving you anywhere? All that stuff you know about Jesus this morning, is it moving you anywhere? Or are you just collecting more information? Quoting, being able to quote more verses, but not living out the verses you're quoting? Are you running toward Jesus, or are you satisfied to know about him from a distance? See, that's what the scribes and Pharisees, they were satisfied to know Jesus from a distance, but they didn't want to get up close. The last response, finally, is the wise men, the Magi. And I want you to see how Matthew, the contrast here, because it is stunning, right? Think about it, guys. These are pagans from the east. Pagans, right? These are the people that are sitting around reading their horoscope and trying to figure out what's going to happen in the world by looking and divining these stars. That's how far away from God they are. They're probably from Persia or Babylon. They studied the stars. They would have been considered outsiders. I'm really surprised they even got court with Herod. Any Jew in Jerusalem would have just turned their back to them. And yet, they are the ones in Matthew's account in this chapter that respond correctly. Look at verses 9 and 10. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. In the Greek, Matthew piles up words here. It's like he can't find enough words to describe how happy they were. That they rejoiced with great, exceedingly great joy. These pagan astrologers were more excited about Jesus than God's own covenant people. And then in verse 11, they came into the house. They saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. They didn't just acknowledge him. They didn't just nod in his direction. They fell down. That's a posture of total surrender. That's the posture of a servant before a king. And then they opened up their treasures and they presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These weren't cheap gifts that they picked up at the Bethlehem Buc-ee's on the way into town. Man, these were costly offerings fit for a king. These were luxury gifts fit for the finest king. Gold was the metal of kings. Frankincense is an expensive perfume used by the royal courts. Myrrh is another valuable spice. And what's interesting about the Magi is they acted on what little they knew. Again, think about it. The scribes knew the prophecy inside and out. But the Magi, they just saw a star and took a chance. They knew far less than the religious experts, but they did far, far more. They traveled hundreds of miles through dangerous territory. They left their homes, their families, their comfort, and they brought costly gifts and they laid them at the feet of a child in a humble house. Their response cost them something. Again, Pierre writes this on worship. He says, faith involves acting in the present situation according to what God says is true, valuable, and worthy of commitment. A person cannot claim to trust God and fail to act on it. The Magi didn't just believe, they acted on their belief. Picture this. Foreign dignitaries, men of power and prestige, flat on their face before a child. Before a man who was God, who looked just like Stetson, my favorite sermon illustration. Everybody see Stetson down here? He's been worshiping the whole time on the front row up here. But just imagine the president, the prime minister, coming and just falling on their face and worshiping before a child. That's not how the world works, is it? But that's exactly how God's kingdom works. Important people from far away bowing before a child. That's what worship looks like. So we have 4 responses this morning in Matthew chapter 2. We've got hostility from Herod. We've got fear from Jerusalem. We've got apathy from the scribes. And we've got worship from the wise men. Knowledge without action is worthless. The Magi knew less than the scribes, but did more. They traveled farther. They sacrificed much. They worshiped deeply. The scribes knew everything and did nothing. Magi simply brought Jesus the best gifts they could find. They came with gold, not aluminum, right? They brought a Bentley, not a Hyundai. And they gave what was natural to them, what flowed from their lives. And it should be our goal to give what is best of ourselves to the Lord, as the Magi did. So here's my question this morning. What's your response to the King? What's your response to the King? Are you like Herod, treating Jesus as a threat to your control, fighting against his authority in your life? Are you like Jerusalem this morning? Are you paralyzed by fear, more concerned about what might go wrong than what is right? Or are you like the scribes, full of knowledge, but empty on action? Satisfied to know about Jesus, but never ever willing to go with him. Or are you like the Magi, willing to act on what you know, willing to travel far, sacrifice much, and fall down and worship him? Guys, this Christmas season, the King still demands a response. He's not asking for perfect knowledge. He's asking for wholehearted worship. He's not asking for you to have all the answers. He's asking you to act on the answer you already have. The wise men gave Jesus the best they had. Are you giving him the best that you have? Or are you just giving him the leftovers? What are you giving him? Your time, your talents, your treasure, your surrender? Because guys, the King has arrived. At last, the King. And that demands a response. What will yours be? Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word this morning. Thank you for this chapter that forces us to examine our own hearts. And Lord, if there is anyone here this morning that's been responding to you with hostility, fighting against your authority, help them to see the futility of that fight this morning. Help them to lay down their weapons and bow before you like the wise men. And if there's anyone here paralyzed by fear, afraid of what following you might cost them, give them the courage to trust you more than their circumstances. And if there's anyone here that has the head knowledge without the heart response, anyone who knows all about you but has never truly come to you, stir their hearts this morning to action, that they wouldn't be just satisfied with mere knowledge. And Lord, for all of us this Christmas season, help us to be like the wise men. Help us to respond with wholehearted worship. Help us to bring our best and to fall down before you and to offer ourselves as living sacrifices. We thank you that at last the King has come. And we worship you this morning. I pray we worship you as we spend time with our families this week, our friends, celebrating this season.